This Friday, our world is going to all kind of gather and focus on one place in one time. This Friday is the opening ceremonies to the 2024 Olympics in Paris. So what that means is that everybody in the world starts to really care about the elite levels of track and field, of swimming, and of gymnastics, which are kind of like backside sports, right? Like they're kind of the back of the house kind of sports during the other 4 years, or like 3.8 years of our cycle, right? I've always enjoyed the Olympics. The Olympics is always something. It's right in that kind of dead time where you're thirsty for sports. Football hasn't started yet. Baseball's kind of hit the All-Star break. So it's a really great time, and I've always enjoyed it. I remember as a kid, there are some iconic moments that just kind of stick out to me as I kind of look back at Olympics. Right? I remember one of the first things I remember when it comes to the Olympics was in 1996 when it was Muhammad Ali that lit the Olympic torch. I remember watching Carrie Strug land her vault that won the U.S. the gold medal on one leg. My sister was in gymnastics at the time, so I remember our whole family locked in one day at my grandma's house watching that. I remember watching Michael Phelps win everything for 2 Olympics, right? I remember watching Usain Bolt turn the last 25 meters of the 100-meter dash into a victory lap and basically look back at everybody and say, what is wrong with you? And then still break the world record, right? But as we get to the Olympics, there are all these iconic moments and all these iconic kind of symbols that happen. There's one that always sticks out to me, and it's one that kind of comes back up every 4 years. And for me, it's a reminder of the Dream Team. 1992, Barcelona. I was 3 years old, so I do not remember watching them play, but I just remember hearing it and seeing everything and wanting a shirt and all this other stuff, right? But the Dream Team was the U.S. decided that they were going to allow professionals to play. And basically, we were going to be able to allow professionals to play in the Olympics. And by doing that, they broke amateurism for a second. But they basically said, we are the best when it comes to basketball, and we're going to prove it to you, right? So the Dream Team was just the all-star of all all-stars. It was the best sports team that has ever been assembled in any singular sport. And I would argue with anybody that wants to talk about it. Because you got Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Michael Jordan, the GOAT, right? The real GOAT, not LeBron. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about that another time. Just say it this way. In the finals, 6-0. And not 6-0. That's it. Argument over, right? Scottie Pippen. You just had Rich Mullins, and then you had the old guys, right? You had Larry Bird and you had Magic Johnson. You had the best collection of talent to ever be on a single team together. They made basketball not look like a sport. They made it look like a performance. So it was one of those things that it was unbelievable. A lot of hype going into it. Recently, I watched a clip from one of the documentaries about the Dream Team. And what they were talking about is they were just talking about when the guys landed in Barcelona for the Olympics, they were absolutely shocked at the pandemonium that was waiting for them. They got off the airplane, and there are thousands of people waiting for them. As the bus is going to their hotel, thousands of people waiting for them. Wherever they were, however they were going, they had constantly people just on their bus, trying to take a picture. They were using those little disposable cameras. If you don't know what a disposable camera is, it was this little thing you had to wind up and you had to get the film developed. Film is this thing that would, okay, anyway. But, so there was just this amazing kind of pandemonium and excitement that was around this team, right? People were their life dream and their life goal was to be able to see Michael Jordan. And they saw him from 100 yards away and he was just a figure that was just kind of going, and they got a blurry picture and they're like, yes, I got it, right? This is awesome. There was just all this excitement around this team. There's a really interesting, in the documentary, they showed a really interesting moment, though. Because the team couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't do anything without being just kind of everybody flocking to them. One day, they were on their way back. I think it was from practice back to the hotel. And usually, they had a police escort to get the bus through the traffic. Well, this day, they didn't have a police escort, or some way they ended up in traffic anyway. And John Stockton. Now, John Stockton was a point guard, probably one of the best point guards ever to play basketball. John Stockton, he's about a 6'1" white guy, right? Everybody else on the team looks like a basketball player. John Stockton looks like he's an insurance agent or an accountant, right? But he's there. he's sitting on the bus and he says, I'm done. I'm going to walk. So he gets out of the bus. His family was right there. They came meet him. And what they did was they just decided to go walk around the city. In fact, Karl Malone was sitting on, his teammate for the Utah Jazz was sitting on the bus watching him. He said, I would give anything to do what he's doing right now. Because he was just walking like a normal guy. There was nothing that was like sticking out about him. He was in red, white, and blue, and but that's about it. He had sunglasses on, and like a good dad, he had some white looking like New Balance kind of Keds on, white socks, and walking around with a video camera, right? 1992, all in. He's walking around and he's doing this. And like the documentary people, they decided they were going to follow him. But as they did, they kind of kept their distance. But you could hear his like microphone picking up. And as he's walking around, he's like, you think they would treat, Michael Jordan like this? It's like they're just like walking right by. Nobody knows who I am. He's talking to people that have like USA stuff on. He's having like conversations, asking them things like, you watch the Dream Team? And they're like, yeah, we love them. And he's like, oh, great. And he just keeps walking. He's the point guard, y'all. There was this one interaction, though, where a girl is wearing a Dream Team t-shirt. Now, on her shirt are all of the guys' faces, right? She has a cape, a USA like flag tied like a cape off of her back. And it's one of the coolest moments in this documentary because she walks up and they're sitting there and he's like, where are you from? And she shares it and they talking. She's talking to one of the guys on her shirt, right? And he's like, have you seen any of the players? And she says, oh, well, we met Charles Barkley the other day at whatever. And she's like, yeah, he's a really good player, huh? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, you got all of them on your shirt. As he says that, his son looks up at the shirt and goes, that's my daddy. And she kind of like, what? And she sees John Stockton's face as she's talking to him. And she's, oh my gosh, yeah. And like she gets an autograph and like you see this like almost like this embarrassment that just comes over her because she's been talking for a couple of minutes now to one of the players and she had no idea. She was all excited. She was wrapped up into all of the excitement of everybody else and all of the people in the city and all of this thing about the greatest team ever assembled and all these kind of things. And whenever she sees the person face to face and actually starts to talk to him, she has no idea. I think it's a really, really telling thing. Because I think sometimes you and I, we can get caught up in all the excitement and all the messaging and all the stuff and all the hype. And sometimes we can miss the person that it's all about. Today in our gospel, I think this image, it actually plays really well to what the apostles are dealing with in today's gospel. Because the apostles today, we hear at the very beginning of the gospel that they come back. We hear like the language at the very beginning is like they come back to Jesus. And if we remember last week, what happened was that Jesus basically told them all, look, go out and spread the gospel. Whose sins you forgive are forgiven, whose sins you retain are retained. Like go out 2 by 2. If you go into a town and they don't accept you, shake the dust off of your feet and keep on going, right? Like I want you to go out as missionaries and go out and proclaim the gospel that I have been forming you in. And today what we hear is they come back. And they come back full of stories. They come back full of all of the excitement. They come back having preached the gospel and proclaimed it to all of these cities and all these villages and all these homes. They've been staying with people. They've been in relationship with people. And they have been telling them about the glory and the message of freedom that the Messiah, Jesus Christ himself, has told them and formed them in. And Jesus looks at him and says, awesome, let's go and rest now, right? Like what they just did was like a Sunday weekend mass schedule on steroids. Let's go rest. Go off to a deserted place. Well, people have been hearing this message. They've been hearing the freedom that Jesus is promising. They've been hearing all of the beautiful teachings that he's been handing on to the apostles. And as he's doing that, their thirst has been stoked. Like they are now, they have a thirst that can't be satiated, right? Like they're looking for this Messiah. They're looking for this Jesus. So what they do is they're all coming to him. I can just imagine piles of people just looking for Christ. We've heard your apostles. We've heard what he said. Now we want to meet you. And everybody's just coming to him. We hear they even try and run away, and everybody's waiting for him when they get there. And Jesus says this, the gospel says this powerful line at the end today. They were like sheep without a shepherd. They were flocking to him. They were coming to him. But they had no one to form them. They didn't know the shepherd. They knew his representative, but they did not know the shepherd. They had got caught up in all the excitement of the message of the gospel. They had gotten caught up in all the sentiments that are associated with it. They got caught up into all the promises of freedom and eternal life that we preach and proclaim, but they didn't know the shepherd yet. And Jesus had pity on them because they hadn't been in relationship with him yet. This past week, I had a very interesting moment. I want to say it was Wednesday night. I was hanging out. I was just at the house. You know, I had my dog running around and stuff. I just eaten dinner, sitting down to watch a little bit of TV, and I remembered that in Indianapolis this week, actually it closed out this morning, was the National Eucharistic Congress. Now you may have seen some pictures, you may have seen some videos of different things. What we had is about 60,000 people from around the United States went to Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is the Colts football stadium. Basically filled the stadium, and they had a massive Catholic Eucharistic Congress for the first time in 80 years in our country. And this is the culmination of the last couple of years of this Eucharistic renewal that the bishops have been calling for and been talking about. And this is why, like last Lent, we did the Behold the Lamb series and all these kind of things. Like, it was just a really, really beautiful thing. And I remember that it was on. So I'm sitting in the living room and I pull up, I look on the screen and I see all the excitement. I see all of as somebody's speaking, they say something and everybody roars with excitement and everybody gets excited and everybody starts talking about it. I'm seeing like more and more people, these popular faces and names that are being presented out on the stage that are talking, and that everybody's fired up and everybody's screaming, and it's this big moment of unity and this big moment of harmony and this big moment of coming together. And then I realized that was the Republican National Convention that was on my TV. Because the Congress was on my laptop. But it was interesting because all the things that were being promised on TV were being fulfilled on my laptop. Now, I don't want this to be a political thing. But I thought it was interesting that it was really easy to get fired up and excited and holler and scream about the sentiments of coming together and being caught up in the movement and in the issues and in all these things. But where's the shepherd? The shepherd. Because when I glanced down at my laptop, the way they opened the Congress, now I've been to at this point, about 100 different kind of conferences. And they usually start off with big music, and they usually start off with a good keynote speaker, and they usually start off with this and that. You kind of have your flow, whatever. The way they started this thing was the Eucharistic processions. There were 4 of them throughout the United States that had been going for about the last month. And they started in the east, in the west, in the north, and in the south. The one in the south actually started in Brownsville, Texas, and made its way through our diocese, through Louisville, up through Louisville, and to Indianapolis. But what they did was they started by getting all of the people that have walked those pilgrimages from the 4 corners of our United States, and they came in first. And then after everybody was introduced and everybody came in and all these pilgrims have come together, what happened? They went right into adoration, and 60,000 people were struck silent. Because the shepherd showed up. They didn't need the sentiments. They didn't need the excitement. They just needed the shepherd. Now, why do I say that for us? Because we don't need 60,000 people. We don't need a stadium to be full, to be prepared for the shepherd. We simply need to recognize him. Do we know the shepherd? I share that as a like a plural statement, but let me ask you this way. Do you know the shepherd? Do you know the shepherd's voice? Do you know the Lord in his word? For years, I've heard homilies and talks about people saying, we need to have a relationship with God. We need to have a relationship with God. We need to have a relationship with God. The reason why we need to have a relationship with God is because sentiment only pulls us so far. Energy only pulls us so far. Excitement only pulls us so far. Because guess what? We have bad days. And there are days that the energy's low. And there's days that I just don't feel like praying, and I just don't feel like doing the church thing. And Lord, I just want to like hide in my room and like leave me alone. Or like my marriage is struggling, or my job is a pain, or school is hard, whatever it is, right? There are times that the sentiments just aren't there. And when that happens, if we're reliant on them, then we walk away from God. Our relationship with God is not a feeling. It's a choice. The reason why Jesus had pity today on this group of people that were coming to him is because they didn't have good shepherds. They didn't have people that were pointing them to the Lord. Like, I want to be very, very honest with you. The least important part of Mass is happening right now. The homily, by far, is the least important part of the Mass. Because we're not here for me. You're here for him. You're here for the real shepherd. And I do my job if I'm pointing you to the shepherd. I do my job well if I'm pointing you to the shepherd. Most of the time, I'm pretty messed up and I have sin and I'm broken. So guess what? My pointing is usually a little bit deformed and a little bit busted up. And I pray for mercy with that. And I hope y'all praying for me to have mercy with that too. But I just want to be very, very honest with you that the most important thing that we come to do today is not to experience the sentiments. It's not music and it's not homilies. The most important reason why we are here is because the shepherd is coming to meet you and to meet me. Do you want to have a relationship with God? We don't have to come up with all kind of wild ideas. Because the church has been doing it for years. The first place we know we can look is the sacraments. Because when we come to Mass, we know that we meet the same God who was incarnate as a baby, the same God who experienced the Paschal mystery, gave himself on Holy Thursday in the bread and wine, gave himself on Good Friday on the cross, and rose himself from the grave. We know that when we come to Mass, we meet Jesus. We come to see him. We know that when we walk into a confessional, that all the sins that we have incurred, all the sins that we have done, we lay on the Lord because he's already paid the debt for them. He's already died for them so that you and I can live. We know in the sacraments we experience Jesus. We know in our prayer that the Lord makes himself readily available, gives himself to us completely again. Whether that's in adoration or in your bedroom, the Lord is still present, still listening, and still answering. Wants you to be in relationship with him. The hardest part is finding the time. But things that are worth it, we make time for. Then finally, Father, whenever I pray, I want to hear God. You want to hear God? Break open a Bible. I remember when I was, as a kid, growing up, I remember at one point, I think I was in high school. I want to say it was my confirmation. My mom, I remember one day I said something like, hey, Mom, I'm going to a retreat. Can I borrow a Bible? And she was like, I don't know if we have one in this house. We just didn't have one. That's not an indictment on my mom. I'll indict her later, but But there's something about us, like, do we as Catholics actually open the Bible? Do we actually listen and reflect on the word that God has given us? God is the one that wrote it. He just used the hand of Matthew and just used the hand of John. He gives us his word. I think sometimes we think, oh, if I want to have a relationship with Jesus, I need to do all these kind of things. I need to go on this retreat, or I need to pick up this devotion, or I need to dress this certain way. None of that is true. We need to give God time and our focus. It's a lot simpler. I once heard a speaker say, where intimacy lacks, we overemphasize technique. So where we lack intimacy, where we lack actually knowing the person, what happens is we overemphasize technique. So if I have a hard time like actually being in a relationship with somebody, what happens is that I use something else that's going to help to stir it, right? So I have a hard time getting a date, so what do? I go to Bumble, or I go to Tinder, or I go to something that's going to make me feel like, oh, I can actually like have relationship. It's going to facilitate it for me. Those things aren't all bad, but there's something important here for us, that we have to give ourselves to the Lord. Otherwise, we'll never know the shepherd. As we come to Mass today, we don't want to get caught up in the need for sentiment. That leads to addiction. We don't want to get caught up in the need for a good talk or a good homily or good music or good. We have all those things, right? Praise God. Hopefully. But we want to get caught up in the need for relationship. Because the shepherd is coming. And when the shepherd shows up, the answer is reverent silence. It's us being able to be before the Lord and just to be in his presence, to receive him. God's coming to meet you. He's going to take an infinite step from heaven to this altar so that he can meet you. How do we respond to the invitation of the shepherd? As we come to Mass, may our response be wholeheartedly a yes, wholeheartedly open. That we may come to know and love the shepherd more so that we can serve him more fully.